I used to work in a sheet metal factory, but then a job came along at the tannery. The hours were better and I would get paid. Also, I'd have the chance to work with leather, both before and after it was on the cow, which had always been a dream of mine. I didn't want to give up my sheet metal job, so I tried to do both jobs and finish middle school.
How old were you?
11. The point is, I was so tired, I tried to puncture an 8-gauge aluminum foil with a leather awl.
Wow.
I learned a lesson. Never half-ass two things. Whole-ass one thing. So if you want to win that seat,
Which I do.
then commit yourself 100%.
Welcome to Managing Humans, the podcast that would like to speak to you in its office. I'm your host, Chad Bates. This week, we're going up a level and talking to my former boss, Heather Beck. Heather is the VP Global Head of Travel and Public Sector Technical Support at SAP Concur. She's also on the National Board of Directors for HDI, which we'll talk about more later on in the podcast. It was great timing for my talk with Heather because we talked about hiring managers assuming intentions of applicants and applicants being overqualified. This is a common point of discussion on LinkedIn right now, especially if you're a job seeker. How do hiring managers handle an applicant that is overqualified for a position? What assumptions are okay, and what should we not assign to someone who has been out there looking for a job for many months? So we'll talk about those and many other issues this week. As always, if you like the show, give it a like, subscribe to it on any of your podcast platforms, and add a comment on our YouTube or at Substack. Now let's get to my conversation with Heather. Welcome, Heather Beck, to the Managing Humans podcast.
Thanks, Chad.
So we'll introduce how we know each other for the listening audience here. So you used to be my boss. You hired me at SAP Concur all those many years ago. In the age before the pandemic, when we used to see people in person, and we got to work together for 2.5 years, I think, if I remember correctly. And you were one of the first people that I thought of when I started doing this podcast, because you're possibly the most aligned with me when it comes to managing other people. So I'm really excited to talk to you about kind of how that started, where you've gone, and what you've done with that, and how you've, kind of changed your vision of how you work with employees over the years.
Well, thanks. I'm flattered that you asked me to be here. And it's funny because when you just mentioned how we met, it kind of reminded me of what I think is some obstacles, right, upon the hiring. Like when I was selecting you as a candidate, I remember we even had a bump in the road before you started. And I think it'd be fun for us to talk about that, right? Because I think if I could tell the listeners maybe sort of what was going through my head at the time, it could be an interesting story too. What do you think about it?
I would love to have that conversation at a deep level, because it's, and I think I've probably mentioned online before, and you obviously know that I'm out looking for a job now. So it's it's an interesting conversation to have, and something that I think is worth discussing in this environment. Like if you are looking to become a manager or are a manager and looking for new jobs, what are those hurdles and things that that hiring managers think about. So I just want to know I know we talked about it at the time, but I don't know if we ever really went back and talked about it again. So let's do it. You can tell the story.
Yeah, I remember not being so sure. And the reason is I really loved you as a person, really was excited about your experience, really felt like you'd be a great culture add to our team, knew that you would be a quality leader and could bring a lot of diverse perspectives. My concern and the reason that I was about to pass you over was that you had been at a large corporation, and my fear was that you would come into our organization and say, "This is a mess. What are you guys doing?" I was so worried that you would see us and think, because of the size of the company that we are, we would kind of have our ducks in a row and that
Mm-hmm.
you would be appalled. And I was just so worried that it wouldn't be a good fit for you. And you would be, let's say, overqualified or just disappointed with the mess that you'd be walking into. And
Mm-hmm.
I made that assumption for you, which was really not fair. And I decided just to kind of give you a call, after I had almost let's say thrown your resume away, right, and just
Mm-hmm.
sort of explain my concerns to you and talk it out with you. And much to my surprise, your response was, don't make these assumptions, because where I came from, things were really cobbled together as well, and you would be surprised what happens under
Mm-hmm.
the surface. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
and
we had a laugh about that. Mm-hmm.
if anybody's listened to the first two guests, which are my former coworkers at AWS, will know exactly where that was and why the assumption was so funny. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that happens a lot is, people assume when you're the hiring manager, um, kind of two separate things. They're going to think our company's weird or messed up or whatever because they work for X, in my case, Amazon or somebody else. And the irony is like people inside Amazon and other large companies know that their systems are, baling wire and duct tape and just being held together by good thoughts and hopeful vibes. And then the other is, I think that there's a lot of how would I say that? Like resumes look real good, and people assume that your job titles don't always like go chronologically, and sometimes they mean different things in different companies. Um, so I think that was part of also the discussion we had. It's like you were a director. Why would you want to be a manager? And it's like, well, it's different. There are different levels and different experiences and different companies and different pathways. Um, so I think it's good for everybody to kind of keep that in mind. Is don't make assumptions for other people in the job search, and be honest about what you're thinking so that they can explain or help you understand where they're coming from.
And I think it was that conversation, before hire, even, that was probably our most honest and vulnerable conversation, where I really got the sense that I understood you, that you and I were aligned. It was probably that was the moment that you and I realized, okay, we're the type of people that lead the same, want to work together, because it was honesty, transparency. We were just as raw maybe as we could be, right,
Mm-hmm.
admitting our faults. Things aren't always as they seem. We have problems, right? Like, we were both just coming to the table, like, as honest as we could. And I do think it was the basis of our relationship and our work, our friendship even going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny how it's those types of maybe hard conversations, and that happened even before we started working together, right? That was just
Mm-hmm.
as we were going through that selection process. So it's funny that all of that kind of led to us working together, and then you determining that perhaps we have the same leadership style. So
Yeah.
yeah, these are the lessons learned, right, when you're managing humans.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Hmm.
So let's go back in time. Let's talk about your very first job. What was the first thing you did for a paycheck that didn't come from your parents?
I mean, besides the typical, like, babysitting or maybe house sitting or taking care of someone's pets, right? Because those are pretty typical. I did have a job under the table, but it was from a business. I was bussing tables at a local country cafe, and attached to that local country cafe were some orchards. And so sometimes I would pick raspberries. And so during the summer, I would have to be there at like 5 a.m. because you wanted to get out there before the sun and the heat, and just pick as many buckets of raspberries or flats of raspberries as we could. And we got paid by the pound. And then I could go home in the afternoon and take a nap and go out with my friends for the afternoon. And I made quite a bit of money doing that. So it was kind of a country roadside cafe that specialized in baking pies
Mm-hmm.
and fruit desserts and things. I worked in the cafe and then also picking raspberries in the field.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like a pretty wholesome environment. You get to
It
work in a
was. I mean,
cafe,
you had to,
pick fruit.
yeah, you had to be a hard worker for sure.
Yeah. Is that do you ever think about that job in terms of like what you're doing now, like the distance you've moved or things you've learned from that first job that you still apply?
Absolutely. I mean, that was especially when I was working in the cafe with customers. I mean, that was my first entrance into the service industry, and it is 100% where I'm meant to be. Every job I've ever had after that was always retail, restaurant, grocery, where I was in direct contact with the customers, and it definitely laid the foundation. I knew that I was meant to serve people. So even when I went into a corporate job or went into technology, it had to be in some kind of service role because that is where I get my energy is by giving to others and serving other people. So definitely I knew right away that that's what I love to do. I didn't want to go out there and pick as many raspberries I could, pick more than the person next to me. I wasn't competing with myself. Like that wasn't my thing, right? I wasn't going to be a
Mhm.
salesperson or someone that was just trying to achieve or create or hit numbers. No, I wanted to interact with people and make them happy. So it
Mhm.
absolutely did. Hmm.
Would be an interesting study to see if how you pick strawberries or raspberries leads to a career.
Yeah.
I, I never thought about that, but you're right. It's like if you get somebody who's like really self-competitive, do they go into sales more often? Or if they're looking out for other people, are they going to go into management or customer service more often? So
Yeah.
that's note to the academics out there. Do some work on that.
There you go.
So how did you get into management? What was the first job that really put you in that position and kind of started the road you're on now?
I mean, I was always in leadership positions, even at a really young age. Like I can remember in high school, even when I worked retail, I was kind of the manager on duty for many places. Like I worked at a J.C. Penney's and I was a key holder. I worked at some smaller retail chains and they would let me, close the shop and be the supervisor on duty. And I even had some college aged kids working, and I was a 16-year-old senior in high school. And here I am, the person that's in charge of closing, securing the store, taking all the money to the bank. I mean, I
Hmm.
wasn't directly responsible for the performance of the individuals, but I certainly was responsible for making sure that they did their tasks and showed up on time. And if there were any employee relations issues, I had to kind of, help them work through their problems and then engage the more senior manager if something, needed to be resolved later. So, I mean, that's pretty managerial if you think about it. I
Hmm.
mean, there's a lot of responsibility there, and that was even by the time I was 16. I think my first real management position though, I was 19, funny enough, and
Hmm.
I worked at a bagel shop and they hired me to be the assistant manager of this bagel shop. And then I was interviewing people, hiring and
Hmm.
firing, doing performance reviews, the full scope of actually helping people grow themselves in their careers at 19 years
Right.
old.
Right.
So I think I just naturally was always a leader, and
Hmm.
that was recognized in me probably pretty early on.
Yeah. And it seems like it seems like a lot of people's first experience with management is somebody gives you a set of keys and leaves, and that's
Yeah.
it's like the first test. Can you
No.
can you lock the door correctly, and do people respect you when
Mhm.
no one else is here? So when you took on that first role as like an assistant manager in a bagel shop, did you feel like you had any training to manage people, or was it really here's the keys and you know good luck?
Yeah, I definitely did not have any training, but at the time, I didn't realize that and it didn't hinder me.
Hmm.
I can remember thinking, wow, I'm managing 26-year-olds with zoology degrees and here I am 19 years old. I can remember thinking like, how did I get picked? How did I get so lucky? But I wasn't intimidated by it at all. I felt like I had the skills at the time. Now looking back, I probably, could have been better equipped. But luckily for me, I didn't really have any issues. I was able to maybe I had a great team. Maybe I just got lucky, but I didn't really, need any better training, I guess. But no, absolutely not. And it's unfortunate because it really could put people in some stressful situations without any basic management training.
Right. Do you feel like you've been provided or gotten any like real formal training about managing people over the years? So if you had a good, company you've worked for or an experience or something you've done for yourself to kind of add to those skills, or is it something that's just kind of naturally come about?
Oh, I absolutely have. I mean, I have been taking formal leadership development and manager training, let's say, for, oh goodness, probably 15 years to almost 20 years easily. And the last 10 years, I've heavily invested in it because I feel like there's always something to learn. And right now I'm working at SAP. That's where you and I met. And as you probably know, they offer so much development to their leaders and their managers, and they have many, many tracks for the different levels of leaders. So if you're a new leader, an aspiring leader, even if you're a mid-level leader, if you're an experienced leader, if you're an executive. So for me, there's always something to learn and explore. And as I move through those levels, I just continue to consume it because I'm always surprised every time it's a new trick. And even if maybe it's familiar content or if it's something I've heard before, it reminds me to use the tools that I thought were useful before, or it just is a refresher on something that might work with a new person I haven't tried. So I love it. And I definitely, I definitely seek those out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the refresher or just the reminder nature of a lot of those things is really helpful because you get very busy doing other things and forget like, oh right, I'm supposed to engage this employee this way, or I need to reach out to my introvert staff or whoever to try to get more engaged with them. And it's like you take a class or have someone remind you that, oh right.
Yeah.
I've done that before, I know better.
I think it was 2019. I took a course at SAP, and one of the things I learned in the course, I thought, how have I never been told this before? Or how have I never been presented this information in this way? Of all the leadership and management courses I've taken. And I remember it was about, there are like 7 things, and it listed them in order of priority, but like 7 things that you should check or assume might be the reason that someone's underperforming. And the very last reason was that it was their choice or their own motivation or their own will. So it was really like, do they have the skills necessary? Do they have the training necessary? Do they understand, the expectation of them? And it's like, go down this list and find and make sure you've removed all these obstacles first before you make an assumption that they're just lazy or they just don't want to be doing it. And it was like, I'd never really had it presented in that way. Now, of course, I've always given people the benefit of the doubt, and I would hope I recognize, well, they're just doing a horrible job because they don't know how to do it, right? Or, but maybe you wouldn't make those assumptions if you're not close enough to the situation or they're not being open and honest enough to you. You might assume they took the training course, they absorbed the information, they passed the course, they have the knowledge. But the real truth is they still didn't feel they're a good test taker and they cheated their way through it or something. And they really don't have the skills, but they never told you that, right? So it was like, how is it 2019? I have been like a senior level leader for as long as I have been managing people. And this was the first time that someone kind of gave me a list that I could actually use as a checklist to, when I was like managing poor performance. So you just never know what you're going to learn or, how it will be presented to you that it might be helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And and then to loop back on that, and then to remember that in every situation where you have trouble with an employee performance issue, and like, oh yeah, it's not motivation. Like, how many people just like default to that being the first thing they think of?
Yeah. I like to say that I always assume the best intent. I tend to be um, an optimist, and I think, you know, people are smart. If people had the right information, they would do the right thing. I'm not sure I still believe that. But anyway, I like, I used to always have, think that people were great and smart and kind. But um, yeah, but it's surprising how, unless someone kind of gives you these tools or gives you these reminders, you may not always default that way.
Mhm. So in that vein of improving your employee performance, what is something that you want managers to do better? Something that you've seen or an experience you've
Mm.
had, even out in the world, but something you want the managers to do better?
I th- I think, I mean, this is just based off a recent experience I've had with a leader, a seasoned leader actually, that I'm kind of coaching. I think just try and be much more open and genuine, and it's okay to be vulnerable. Right, as leaders, we're just people too, and
Mhm.
your team needs to know you and understand your weaknesses, your insecurities, because that's the only way that they can kind of step in and complement them. Like I need my team of direct reports to kind of fill in the holes where I have holes, I guess. And so, but if you don't tell them that, you don't show them, you're not just honest about that, there's no way for them to recognize that and be able to kind of help or, you know, support you in that way. And I far too often I see leaders trying to be the picture of strength and kind of be the perfect manager or the perfect leader to their team. And
Mhm.
I think it backfires to them, right? So we've just kind of recently had our annual people surveys results released to our organization, and I have a couple managers who this is the type of feedback that they're receiving from their team is they don't think they're genuine, they don't feel supported by their manager. And the more that I'm having conversations with that leader, I'm finding it's because they're trying to um, not show all of the stress they're under or the things that are going on with them personally to their team. And I said, well, no wonder your team thinks that you're not genuine or your team thinks you're not approachable or available. You are emotionally not available to them, and they're sensing that. So, of course, they're going to say these things to you, right? You need to just be open and honest. Let them know when you're struggling. Let them know when you need their help because they can be there to support you. So, I think that too often managers have this idea, and it's just like an archaic idea that we need to be stronger or better somehow. No, we just need to be ourselves and let them kind of help fill in.
Yeah, that's great. That's when I came up with the name for this show, and on vacation in Italy. It started out as trying to put all these words together, and my idea was it's managing humans, but we're also just humans managing. And
So
it is
true.
that vulnerability of like hey, we're all just employees here. I my job's to take care of you, but it doesn't mean that I know more than you do, or I'm superhuman or anything else. It's like I'm still showing up every day and going through some of the same stuff that you are. It may be different, but I'm still struggling too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, be more human. So tell me about a time, and you can exclude me here, that you made a great hire. How did it feel when you interview the person, and what were the things that you like to ask during an interview to try to figure out who that right candidate is?
Yeah, I had one just in the last year, and I still can feel a physical response when I think about the experience of going through the interview process and like potentially getting to a point of this person accepting the offer. And it's something I've kind of learned as I've worked with a coach over the years is like pay attention to your body's physical response as you think about situations, right? You
Mhm.
think about this option or this option. Can you feel yourself, your heart rate, getting excited? Can you feel your stomach? Or so I'm much more in tune with like how my body feels when I'm thinking about certain thoughts. And I get so excited and I can actually feel like physical energy when I think about this person and the connection that I made with them. And I couldn't explain it. It's almost, I mean, this sounds horrible, but almost like when you find a romantic partner and there's just that chemistry you can't explain, right? But with this person, I think what it was, there's something about our values had aligned. And I knew that they were going to be able to lead the team that I needed them to lead in the way that aligned with the values that we were trying to instill, with the culture we were trying to create, and that they were going to be able to. So we're standing up a brand new support center in a location that we had never been in before. And so they were going to be a leader on their own. They were going to be creating a brand new team. And I needed to trust they were going to be able to understand what we like to create as far as our larger team culture and then emulate that. But them being new to organization as well, I mean, you have no idea really how it's going to go. And since they would be on their own and kind of remote, there wouldn't be a lot of opportunity for me to be influencing that, that culture. And I just had to trust that this person was going to create something that would blend in and really represent what we had going. And so I think it was because I realized that our values aligned and I could just feel it. And still to this day, this person and I both just gush over the fact that I can't believe I found you and I can't believe I found this company, right? Like we both will be saying this, like we just can't believe it was such a great match. And I had to really, really fight to bring this person on. There were a lot of obstacles along the way, and I had to really trust my gut and go to bat for this person and just say, you have to trust me. You have to trust me. This is really going to make a difference. And then this person had to set aside all of the companies and offers that they really had believed they were going to accept and where their career was headed, and instead just do a complete 180 and accept our offer because there was just something about it. So, without just too many details, I just think that it was like, if I know what I valued and what it was really important as far as the way that person was always going to show up every day and treat people and lead the team, when our values aligned, it was the best hire I've ever made. And a year now, 14 months later, it's proven to be true. I mean, everyone just really feels like this person like epitomizes exactly, what our culture is and what we're trying to create. And they have a very, very bright future with us now.
Right. That's great. It's just good to trust your gut sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you feel like there is space for that in I mean, obviously where you work, but in corporate America? I mean, I feel like there's some big companies that, take that away and some that encourage it.
I would like to think so. I think in the larger corporations, for sure, those that focus on, those that have leadership development programs, those that focus on coaching rather than mentoring, those that have, D&I initiatives, those that really support mental health. I mean, the larger companies, I think, are probably much more in connection with things like that. Therefore, their leaders, there will be pockets of leaders that will be as well. I would hope so. It really makes a difference, right? Because it's about they support me in really exploring and understanding my own values and what motivates me to lead. Therefore, I'm able to recognize that in others when I'm hiring and interviewing and then go forth and create those multipliers, right? So I would like to think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. So tell me about a time that you had to help an employee move on to another opportunity.
Yeah, I've done it a lot, and luckily for me, I'm always able to do it and still salvage the relationship with the person and kind of let them save face or go with grace. And I think the reason for that is my approach is always, I'm here for you. I know this is going to be difficult, but I'm going to be with you every step of the way. And, let's design this together. Tell me how you want this to go. So I let them be a part in kind of crafting the timing, the messaging, how are we going to communicate this? How are we going to communicate this? Do you want to exit silently? Do you want to, do a farewell tour? Who do you want me to say it to? How do you want me to word it? When we send out communications, things like that. And I think just letting them know, and then I check in with them, continuously along the way and even after. And I just let them know that this doesn't devalue you in any way. This just wasn't a good fit. And that you're, just really kind of trying to be their cheerleader and their advocate during that process, and let them know that they're going to get through this, because it's almost as if in that moment, while I'm doing what the business needs and I'm taking the hard approach, and it's very clear that I'm telling them, this is over at this point. I am also on their side at that point. I am now there to pick them up, there to like support them, to let them process their grief and emotions, and I'm being there. It's like I'm being their, friend, if you will, or advisor also. And I incorporate that into it from the very moment that I start, the really difficult message with them. And I have had a lot of feedback that it's like, thank you for being so caring. I don't know, I can't believe that you would do this. And then like they know it's hard for me as well. They can tell that I'm struggling with it because I'm showing genuine care and emotion. Like, I do care about you and I know this is hard for you, but this has to be done, So maybe like you would do with your best friend or your child. Like, I'm doing this because I love you, but I have to do it. And I know this is hard, but I'm going to still love you after this. It's, something like that. So, yeah, I have. And usually it strengthens the relationship after that. I have had someone that I have had to demote out of their role, but they have stayed within my larger organization, and our relationship still was strengthened and has grown after that. And they have still continued to be a very strong contributor to the team, just not in the role that they were in that wasn't appropriate for them. And everyone was very surprised that I was able to kind of work them through that. They thought it was just going to be some big dramatic, blow up, and that it would end up being a performance problem. But I was actually able to transition them out and save them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that, do you typically like make that a longer conversation? Like they're not being surprised by the layoff, or the layoff or firing, whichever way it kind of goes, or a demotion or something like that? Or do you feel like there's just a point where you have to jump in and have that conversation that's going to be pretty tough?
If it's performance related, it absolutely better be a long conversation. They better see it coming, right? I mean, that should be something that you're talking about with them for a long time. I used to work at a company where we did a lot of acquisitions. And so after we would acquire a company, we had to kind of do an analysis and then make a decision of how we were going to go forth with the business. And a lot of that, sometimes we determined that there were extra roles, or we determined we had just acquired employees that just absolutely were not the caliber of employees that we needed, and we were not going to invest in them. Those were different. Those were kind of blindsided conversations. But I think, maybe they knew there's the potential they were coming because the company was acquired. And so they, got that message. So they probably knew there was some risk there soon after that. But, outside of those situations, if it's performance related, they definitely should be having plenty of notice, let's say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't ever want to surprise anybody with a firing or, whatever term we want to put on it for performance. So, so what's something you learned from the best manager you ever worked for?
I don't know. It's hard to use the term best and think of a single person. I tend to have great things in every manager I've worked for. I don't know if I have a best and a worst. But
it's going to make the next question really hard.
Yeah. Something great that I've learned from a manager that was just really appropriate to me as a person, I think, was that, because I tend to be a perfectionist, and along with that perfectionism tends to come some procrastination, because if I can't figure out a way to like get it all done perfectly, I'm just going to spin on it or avoid doing it until I have the time or the clarity to like do it all right. And so the message from her was, Heather, everything doesn't have to be an A+ job. right? Sometimes you can turn in a C plus paper and then revise it and turn it back in to get some extra credit, right? Like some things, if we need you to get it done, you can just get it done and turn in a C plus job, and that will be okay. And then later you can come back and refine it and get it, And it was like, it never occurred to me, right? So being the kind of student that I was, or just being kind of like a perfectionist that I was. And again, this was like in my 40s, before like someone said this to me, and it kind of dawned on me that like, oh wow, maybe everyone else that is successful or gets by in life, they're not doing A plus work. They're just, completing the task and moving on. And it never had dawned on me before. So it was like, my goodness, this is great advice. And so I think why they were such a great manager for me, or why that was so important, is because she recognized, or like through conversations, she kind of recognized like what was slowing me down or causing me, stress. It was the fact that I wanted to do everything perfectly and then couldn't find the time to actually, dedicate to get things done perfectly. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, that is good. I think you and I are similar in that way, that I had a boss, and this was more around college, but his mantra was C's get degrees. And
Yeah,
it was one of those
exactly.
things, like I had struggled. I mean, I took a long time to get my BA, and it was because I kept trying to like get 100% on everything, and it was just burning me out. And I realized I was doing the same thing at work. And it was like, sometimes you just have to turn something in or just put in a version of it and then come back later. And that, that's like my mantra now when I'm working on stuff is C's get degrees. You just got to get it turned in.
That's exactly it. I'm going to write that down too, because
Yeah.
you're going to pass, right? It's going to be good enough. And that was the point. Just please get this done. That's what we need so we can move on to the next thing. No one's going to know how perfect it was in the end.
Yeah. I mean, especially at work, I think we do that to ourselves. Like we try to come up with perfection, and then you realize that the little thing you're working on is just a piece of a larger part of a huge machine. And it's going to be,
Right.
painted over and covered up by a million other things. So no one's going to see like how great your spreadsheet was, or how cool the graphics were on this presentation. You just need to get the information to your team.
Yep, exactly.
So I'll rephrase the next question a little bit. What's the thing that you learned not to do from a manager that you had?
Yeah. Yeah. If I think about this, the unfortunate part is that I still do it. So while I don't like it, it's still something that I struggle with as well. Because the manager, yeah, some of the worst traits in a manager, that things they do that I don't like. Being so hands off that I only get feedback when it's negative, right? Now, if I flip that and think about how I manage, sometimes I have the tendency, because I tend to manage very high performing leaders themselves. And so my management style is, let's say it's pretty hands off. If they're doing great, I don't have a lot of feedback for them. And I sometimes have found myself even saying the words like, you won't hear from me unless things, unless I have something I need to like tell you, like unless things are going wrong. But they need that positive reinforcement as well, right? And so if I think back to the time when I was reporting directly to the CEO, and I never heard from him. And so I could make the assumption, well, things must be going great. Like my numbers are great. I'm staying within budget. Our team's, performing fine. Things must be great. But I would get it when he did want to talk with me, or he did schedule a one-on-one or call me into his office. I would panic, absolutely panic, because I made the assumption, oh shoot, something must be wrong. And usually it was. And so I never got any positive feedback from him or any normal casual interactions. So when I did hear from him, it was because it was, some kind of opportunity or criticism, constructive feedback, right? And so it made me nervous, and I didn't really have like a trusting relationship with him. And so it's not a great way to manage. And so I know that I need to be looking for opportunities to give the positive feedback even to the high performers more often, right? I even have a sticky note on my desk that said has the number 5 with a smiley face and then the number 1 with a frowny face. So for like I need 5 happy pieces or 5 positive pieces of feedback to someone per every 1 piece of constructive feedback. And I just am trying constantly to give just, hey, that was a great email that you wrote. Thank you. Or, hey, thank you for sending that message. Or, oh, I see that you're online really late. You don't need to work late, but I do appreciate that you're putting in some extra hours. Like, I just need to make sure I'm telling them when I see things, because without mentioning it, all they're ever going to hear from me is, hey, will you come into my office? And I know what that's like on the other end of it. So I need to be better about it, because being on the receiving end of that, it's not good.
Yeah. Yeah, you're setting a weird relationship trend. It's like if your spouse only talked to you when they had a problem.
Right.
That it's like, can we talk?
Actually
It's
even
like, oh God, we're breaking up.
I thought about it for my husband too. I'm like, yeah, he probably only gets the negative, right? He only gets, you didn't hang the towel on the right towel bar. But what about all the times that he does put the soap on the right soap dish? Do I tell him that? No.
That's right.
So I need to practice this with him too, right? That's like, as humans, we need that reinforcement, and we need to know that people see us and we're doing the right things. So,
well, I think there's such a distaste for micromanagement that we've, almost like the pendulum swung too far. And it's like we just let our employees who are doing things right just do whatever they want, which is, it's nice that if you have employees that can do that, but not giving them any kind of feedback or anything else, even like you said, like casual conversation. I mean, it's something that's just disappeared with work from home and everything being on Zoom or Teams, that you just don't have that, like, hey, you're doing a good job. It's just casual, simple, easy. But it's like the only time you get a scheduled meeting is like something bad is happening.
Right. Now, this because we did work together. I do enforce having regular one-on-ones with my direct reports, regardless, just because I want to chat with them. I want to make sure they're okay. I want to know their lives are fine. And if we have nothing to talk about at work, I want to know how their dog's doing. I want to know what trip they're taking, because I do believe that having that relationship, basic human relationship, friendship, that foundational, that foundation of trust built is important. But I'm not taking the opportunity during that time to give them those little positive feedback about, the small things that I see, or reminding them that I think they're great leaders, or that, they have wonderful values that they're displaying. And so those are the things that I need to do better. But it's funny because, like you say, it is all with great intention. I don't want to be a micromanager. I want to empower them. I want to show them that I trust them. They are in the positions they're in because they're very tenured leaders. They've proven their skills. And so I don't want to get in their way. I don't want to take up their time. But even with my greatest intention, just like you said, I'm a human that's trying to manage people too. I have good intentions, but I'm not always executing properly. So I need reminders. Even though I've had it done to me, I need reminders sometimes too.
Yeah. It's the amazing power of a sticky note on the desk. It really does.
Yep.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah.
So our last question is there a question that you've been wanting me to ask you, or something that you want to share with everyone? I think the thing that that I took from you that would be a good question, or a good like add-on, is like networking and or doing things outside of work. So like your work with HDI or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's really important to me. Yes. So I am on the national board of HDI, which is a technical support and service management professional organization. And I got involved in it just so that I could find out what's going on in the industry. You know, what tools are people using? What are processes? And it was so awesome because when I needed something at work, I could quickly message someone on a message board in this community and say, hey, what SLAs do you use for this? Or what tool do you guys use for this? Or does anyone have any experience with workforce management? Right. And, 1,500 people could reply to me really quickly. And it was really great. And then I just got so deeply involved in this community because I found this is a huge organization of professionals that love serving people just like I do. And we're all
Mm-hmm.
struggling through the same problems every day. And then as I got more involved and started volunteering, I found out that these are the same caliber of people that not only do what I do, love technology, love serving people, but they also have it in their heart to be volunteering and giving back and being so generous with their time. And I have made some of the best friends that I've ever had through this organization. And then now I've even hired, like, our current COO for our technical support team at SAP. It was one of my HDI friends and contacts, and I referred her to come work with us because you just meet the most amazing people through this organization. And it's really helped me through times when I had a job transition. It's helped a lot of people through times with job transitions since we are in technology, but it just gives me something else to focus on. It gives me other ways to think about things, and it gives me a big network of people to rely on when I don't have the answer immediately or I need to think of something, another way to do something. And it obviously helps with visibility, when you are trying to create a personal brand or get your name out there. Being involved in any kind of organization like that helps. But if you're an extrovert or if you're an introvert and you're trying, to push yourself, if maybe you need help communicating or with public speaking, being involved in something like this is so helpful because it will just kind of push you to have those
Mm-hmm.
conversations, push you to network, push you to join these events. So mhm,
Yep.
I definitely recommend it. I need it to kind of fuel myself because I'm
Mm-hmm.
such an extrovert, I need all those connections and conversations and hugs and stimulating technical support,
Right.
you know, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, challenges to solve together.
I think that's a great suggestion for new managers is like, find that network, build that network.
Yeah.
It's great when you have something predefined like HDI or, some other trade group, but finding some way to, connect with other people doing the same thing is always beneficial.
Well, especially if you have like an employee relations issue, you may not want to go to another manager at your company to be like, hey, I'm struggling with Joe. Here's what's going
Mm-hmm.
on with him. What would you say? Because you don't really want to disclose what's going on with this person to someone that might know him or know of him. But you could easily, call one of your other experienced HDI leaders in the same industry that are leading the same type of individuals, maybe technical support or call center, analysts, and be like, look, here's the situation. He shows up late every day. You know how important it is that he needs to be on the phones at the beginning of his
Mm-hmm.
shift, whatever, if they manage the same type of individuals, like, this is what I'm thinking about saying to him, what would you do? Or have you had this situation before? So even when it comes to like leading people and navigating those difficult conversations or making decisions about how you would approach a situation or coach someone through something, it's great to have other experienced leaders in the same industry that don't work at your company because you can bounce
Mm-hmm.
ideas off of them without really exposing someone else's personal situation. So it
Mm-hmm.
has been extremely valuable in that way as well. Or you're struggling with your boss, can't really talk to your peers if you're having an issue with your boss, but you certainly could go talk to a friend that you have in the industry that would understand or maybe has been in that situation before. So
Right.
that's another reason it's really nice
Yeah.
to have that network.
It's also super helpful if you don't want to poison the well if you're trying to offload a poor performing employee or somebody you're struggling with. If you talk
Yeah.
to your coworkers or the other managers, it's like, you want to take this guy on? Like, nope,
Yeah.
thanks. You already told me. You already told me all the problems you're having with him.
Yeah, exactly. But really, he'd be great for your team. Trust me.
Yeah. We called that foisting an employee at Amazon. It's like, well, which team are we going to foist this person on? So, well, Heather, I really appreciate the time. This was great to catch up and get some more of your knowledge and share it with the world. Next time, we'll probably talk about business travel, because that's one of the areas that I've gotten the most questions is, as a manager, and especially someone who has a global team. What are some of the things you can do to, travel better and interact with other, employees and other cultures? And I think you have a lot of experience in that place. So we'll come back and talk about that.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Thank you for
All right.
having me.